Good morning. I'm Reverend Lindsey Franklin, and I come bringing grace and peace from Richmond Hill. And I'm really, really glad to be with you all this morning. Please pray with me. Oh God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight. Oh God, you are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Ask, and it will be given you. Search, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened. Have there ever been more excruciating words than these? Tell them to someone who knows the excruciating longing of grief, where your whole body would give anything for just a glimpse of what or who you've lost. Tell them to someone who knows the excruciating longing of desire, where your whole body wants something or someone that for whatever reason is just out of your reach. Tell them to someone who knows the excruciating longing of fear, where your whole body is on edge longing for safety. Ask, and it will be given you. Search, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be open. To anyone who has ever longed for something with their whole being, who has prayed hard, begging God, anyone listening for something to be different, to be transformed, these words of Jesus in the Gospel of Luke this morning, they can taunt us. And boy, are we a people who long for things. Our longings, be they marrow deep or fleetingly shallow, fill our days and fill our lives. Catholic priest and theologian Ronald Rolheiser, in his book, The Holy Longing, says it like this: "We do not wake up in this world calm and serene, having the luxury of choosing to act or not to act. We wake up crying, on fire with desire, with madness." He then adds this: "What we do with this madness, this is our spirituality." What we do with our madness, with our grief, our desires, our fear, where we put our excruciating longings, this is our spirituality. I first came to Richmond Hill as an intern in 2017 in the summer. It was an incredibly tender time in my life. I was in the middle of a powerful but confusing life transition. Not only was I suddenly religious, which was new, but I was also sensing a call to ministry, which was also new. I almost couldn't recognize the person I was becoming. It was terrifying. Not only that, but my partner Kevin and I were searching for a place where both of us could call home. And in that search, trying to decide if we were going to create a home together or not. That thing that I was longing for a life, my life. I remember feeling this intense pressure to figure it all out by the end of the summer. I was so wound up tight in desire, longing for clarity, for certainty even, tangled up in both fear and grief, fear of what I might lose if I made the wrong decision, grief in losing a life I had previously imagined for myself. I was grieving a version of myself that I no longer was, but I did not yet know who I was becoming. Can anyone of you here recall a season of life like this? Or any of you in one right now? Richmond Hill is a spiritual retreat center, a residential community, and an ecumenical Christian fellowship, all housed in a historic monastery overlooking the city on the highest point in Church Hill. We live by a modified Benedictine rule of life, a set of rules with which we seek to align our lives with God. Our very first rule is called the conversion of life, which we define as living one's life as if it were in conversation with God. living our lives in continuous conversation with God. What I found that summer at Richmond Hill was space for that conversation. Space to unravel my longings and pour them out into our rhythm of prayer every day, 3 times a day. Space during my weekly spiritual direction sessions with Reverend Janie Walker to pay attention to where God was showing up in my life. Space to ask, to search, and to knock. Most importantly, space to listen to where God was leading me. That summer, I realized that my longing for answers, my grasping for certainty, they had been choking my ability to see clearly, blocking my conversation with God. Richmond Hill gave me space to practice living my life in conversation with God. And slowly, my life, began to come into focus. In his powerful book on mysticism, Simon Critchley writes about how mystics in all faith traditions tend to understand God as present, not as an object to be grasped, but as the direct and transforming center of life. The direct and transforming center of life. Too often, the excruciating power of our longings, our grief, our desires, our fear, they tempt us to grasp at God like an object. But when God becomes an object, if our longings are fulfilled at the time, then we start to believe that God is on our side. If our longings are unfulfilled, God becomes an object, or God as an object then must be absent. We ask and we demand answers, we search and demand finding, we knock and we force the door open. Without space for the whole conversation, space to unravel our longings and pour them out in prayer, without space to pay attention to where God is indeed showing up, space to ask and search and knock, and to actually listen where God is leading us, we risk being the ones answering our own questions. We risk becoming our own idols. We are no longer able to make God the direct and transforming center of our lives. Near the end of that summer, I made my way to Charlottesville to stand in prayerful protest with other clergy at the Unite the Right rally for white supremacy on August 12th, 2017. Much of that horrific day, which I imagine many of you remember, the day that ended with Heather Heyer being killed by a weaponized vehicle, much of that day deserves reflection. But it's the chant that I heard echoing from the park that day that still haunts me. You will not replace us. You will not replace us. You will not replace us in power. You will not replace us in dominance. You will not replace us as the ones with a certain grip on God's favor. The pernicious theological undercurrent of this chant is that God is an object to be had or to be lost. You will not replace us reveals the idolatry of white Christian nationalism. In this distorted theology, whiteness, Americanness, replaces God as a direct and transforming center of life. In this distorted theology, whiteness replaces God as the direct and transforming center of life. I had spent the whole summer at Richmond Hill learning how to give my own longings for certainty space, practicing living my life in conversation with God, allowing God to hold those longings and transform me in the process. A summer of surrender, of letting go, of giving up. On August 12th, I saw what happens when our longings for certainty instead curdle into violence. When we convince ourselves that God must be on our side, we are no longer praying. That's a kind of certainty that stops asking, stops searching, stops knocking on the door. That kind of certainty stops making space to listen to God. That kind of certainty will kill rather than be transformed. But what if God is not an object to be grasped? What if Jesus' promise in this gospel is not that our excruciating longings will be immediately relieved, that we will get exactly what we want, but that in our persistence in asking, in our persistence in searching, in our persistence in knocking on that door, we practice making God the direct and transforming center of our lives. What if it is in asking that we receive, in searching that we find? What if it is in the knock that we realize that the door is already open? What if prayer is not getting what we long for, but being transformed by our longings? We are living in a time wound up so tight in longing, a time of excruciating grief over so much that has been lost, a time of excruciating desire where justice, peace, stability, even one another seem so far out of reach, a time of excruciating fear where so many people are living on the very edge, longing for safety. And make no mistake about it, we are living in a time that demands action. People are getting disappeared off the streets in unmarked cars. Children are starving to death in Gaza. Kids here in Richmond are getting killed by gun violence. Sometimes the enormity of our longings make it so hard to act. But action demands transformation. And transformation requires spaciousness. Space to pray, space to listen, space to be continuously transformed by being in continuous conversation with God. Our mission at Richmond Hill is to seek God's transformation of our metropolitan city. Note that word, seek God's transformation. We cannot transform our city on our own. We need to ask God to transform us, to give us courage, to give us wisdom, so that we can go out and become the people who transform this city, who transform this world. So I close today with an invitation. Come to Richmond Hill. Come find space to listen to God and allow for your own transformation. Rita Ricks is in the house today, and she leads our Listening to the Silent retreat, a powerful opportunity to actually slow down and listen to what God is saying. Lydia Mercado, who's a member here at St. Paul's, she's the one who connects everyone to spiritual directors. Dr. Laurinette Lee, who many of you all know, can guide you through the dwelling of enslaved Africans, which is itself a place of powerful transformation. But more than this, I invite you to ask, to search, to knock, and then listen. Live your life in conversation with God. Practice making God the direct and transforming power of your life. Allow God to transform you. The mystery of God that we cannot grasp, whose ways that we cannot fully know, and whose love is more powerful than we can possibly imagine. Thanks be to God. Amen.